Hello and welcome back to ISpeakSpokeSpoken. My name is James and today we're going to be discussing how to introduce yourself in English. Okay, so how do you introduce yourself in English? So let's start with the start of a sentence. So quite often you want to say hello or hi, but maybe in a more formal situation or if you want to be a bit more fancy. Okay, so when do we use good morning, good afternoon, or good evening? So we have many different ways of using this. We use good morning before 12 o'clock in the afternoon. So it can be ranging from maybe 5 a.m. until 12 o'clock. That is a good time to say good morning. When is it a good time to say good afternoon? It's probably between 12 o'clock and around 6 p.m. depending on what time of year it is, but usually when the sun starts going down, we will stop saying good afternoon. And when will we say good evening? That's usually around evening time, so 6 p.m. until about 10 o'clock. And then any time after that, we will say good night. And that's what we say before we go to sleep or when it's nighttime. Perfect. So next up, we are going to be talking about how we express who I am. Or who other people are. So we might want to ask someone their name. This is a polite thing to do when you first meet someone. Or if you've already met someone and maybe you're not so good with names. So what we say is, what's your name? Can you say the word name? Can you repeat after me? Name. Fabulous. And just so you know, just up here in the corner, we have a link to all of the resources that you see here on the board and a quiz that you can take and if you send us in the comments how you do on that, we would love to hear. You can also see down in the description all of the same things. And if you just click the link, you will see those. Fabulous. So a good answer to what's your name is by telling people your name. But we have a couple of ways of doing this in English. You might say, I'm Alex, but only say that if your name actually is Alex. So you might answer with, I am Alex. And a bit more of a smarter way of saying this, if maybe your boss is talking to you and you want to answer them, you might say, my name is Alex. That is a more formal way of saying that same sentence. And a nice thing to say to someone when you first meet them is also, nice to meet you. You're stating to that person that it is a nice thing that you have met. You see, and who doesn't want to be told that when you first meet someone? It's nice. So, can you try and pronounce the word meet? Meet. Remember, we have that long sound here. Meet. Can you say it? Meet. Perfect. Good job. Okay. Next up, we are going to talk about nationality. Because this does play quite a bit into when we're talking about ourselves and when we talk to other people about themselves. Because our nationality is a big part of our identity, isn't it? So, we might say, where are you from? And what this is saying is, what country are you from? Or maybe, what town are you from? So you're asking, from where has that person lived or come from? And a great answer from that. Yes, and you may also say, where do you come from? So you may say, where are you from? Or where do you come from? And these are two acceptable things to ask people. And a good answer to that, very similarly to the name, is you could say, I'm Canadian. So you'd say, I'm Canadian. Or you may say, I am from Canada. So the same thing with any country. You may say, I'm Canadian, I'm Australian, I'm Indian. And the same thing when it comes to the others. So I am from Canada, I am from Melbourne. Something like this. Perfect. Next up, we have age. You might want to talk about your age. If you're writing a personal CV or something like this, you might want to mention how old you are. So if you're asking someone else, you might say, quite simply, how old are you? It's a pretty simple question here. So how old are you? And from that, you would expect someone to either to say, I am 28 or I'm 28. That's perfect. And maybe someone would answer with their actual birth dates. They'd say, I was born on May the 5th or May the 4th or something like this, and then go into a bit more detail in that sense. Perfect. So next up, let me just clear the board. There we go. Next up, we may want to talk about location, where someone actually is in this moment. We may want to say, where do you live? And this isn't asking where have you lived in the past. This is asking where now are you residing? Where is your house? So you could answer, I live in Sydney. Or you could say, I live in Australia. And maybe if someone's asking about your past, you could say, I lived in Rome for 5 years, or I have lived in Sydney for 3 years. Something like this. Perfect. Okay, so next up, we are going to be talking about state of mind. So how would you ask someone what is going on in their brain today, or what is going on in their feelings today? You wouldn't ask these questions. You would say something like, how are you today? How are you today? This is asking someone, how are they feeling? And quite often in English, we may actually use how are you as a main greeting. If we walk past someone, hey, how are you? Or how are you doing? So quite often we can actually use this as just a normal greeting. But it can also be used with the expectation that someone will tell us how they're feeling. So you might reply to this with, I'm fine, I'm doing okay. Or if you're not feeling too great, I'm not feeling great. And can you try and pronounce the word great? This is a very common word in English. Great. Great. That's great. Okay, so next up, occupation. So the job that this person does. This is something that we very regularly talk about on a daily basis with people. So, what's your occupation? Or quite commonly, we will also say, what do you do for a living? And also, we may also say, what do you do? Just what do you do? And this isn't saying to someone, what are you doing? Or something like this. This is saying, what is your job? And that's one that people get quite mixed up sometimes because it doesn't sound like you're asking about someone's job, but it is. So to that, you would then answer, I work as an engineer, or I'm a nurse. So you could say, I work as, or you could say, I am a, and then you can say whatever job you have. And in that sense, you can then tell people what you do. Can you try and pronounce these two words here? So engineer, engineer, fabulous, nurse, nurse. That's great. Just so you all know, I'm a British native speaker, so if you follow along with me, then that will help you to improve your pronunciation in British English, but it's also absolutely okay if you are getting an accent in American English, Australian English, and so on and so forth. But yes, next up on our list, we have hobbies. So quite often, we want to tell people about what we do for fun, even if it's just not our job. So what are your hobbies is a nice question to ask someone. So, or you could say, what is your favorite pastime? Or you could just say, what is your favorite thing to do? Or something like this. And then a good answer to that would be, I enjoy ... I enjoy reading, I enjoy running, so on and so forth. I am passionate about ... I'm passionate about painting. Or I spend time gardening. I spend my time doing that thing, you see. That's perfect. So quite often we want to say to people about our status in life. So what has happened in our life? So I am married. So this is saying to someone, I got married. Like you're saying to someone that you have a husband, you have a wife. I'm a married person. Can you say married? Married? Perfect. Okay. You could also say, if you're not with anyone else, you could say, I'm single. I'm single. All right. And you can also say, I'm widowed. which means that unfortunately someone's husband or wife has died and they are now widowed. If you have kids, you could say, I have one child. You could also say the opposite to I don't have any children. Remember that difference there between child and children, as that is the difference between having one child or having multiple children, or the opposite of not having them. Okay, so you can quite often very often we need to use our manners in English. It's a nice thing that when someone has done something for us, we want to thank them, we want to show our appreciation of what they have done for us, and we have a few ways of doing this in English. We may say, thanks. And this is a very short way, a very short, quick way of saying thank you. It's not very grand and it's just something that we say to people on a regular basis. Someone lets us pay for our food in the shops. Oh, thank you, thanks. We may say this, and then thank you is a bit more of a we would use this. We use them quite interchangeably, but this one is what we use in more formal situations. You see. Okay, so quite often when someone asks us about something, about ourselves, it is a polite thing to say, what about you? And before we get on to that, can you try and pronounce about? About. Nice. Okay. And this is something that people like, because if someone's constantly just speaking about themselves, then we don't get anything to speak about. So we want to ask, what about you, to actually find out about the other person. Fabulous. So here we have an example where someone is explaining about themselves, they're introducing themselves, and they're using a lot of the things that we have already talked about in this video. So, hello, my name is Sarah and I'm 30 years old. I'm Canadian and live in Toronto. I was born in Vancouver but moved to Toronto when I was 10. I'm a graphic designer and have been in this field for 8 years. Can you say field? This means the area in which your job is. Can you say field? Field. Remember, stretch that vowel. Field. You got it? Perfect. Okay. I got married at 26 and have been happily married for 4 years. I enjoy hiking and photography. Can you say that one? Photography. Photography. Remember, you can pause the video and keep trying and just rewind and try again. Photography. You got it. In my free time. What about you? Great. So that is how you introduce yourself in English. Just keep practicing. If you didn't get it this time, just keep going, and then the more you practice, the better you'll get at it. We've been ISpeakSpokeSpoken. I've been James, and remember, in a joyful atmosphere, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.